Welcome, everybody, back to KC Happy Hour, episode number 66, our final episode before the 2022 SKUSA SuperNationals, the 25th running of the event. We are headed out first thing over the weekend to get into Las Vegas. We'll have a ton of content coming next week, but this is the last show that we've got from our studios back at home. Myself, Aaron Hackmeister, as always, joining us for the very first time on Happy Hour, but you'll see his face quite a bit next week. Mr. Mike Smith will be joining us in the broadcast booth. Mike, thank you for joining us here tonight, buddy.
I appreciate being here.
And in our first of many hopeful collaborations, along with next week, David Cole joins us, although he's on the wrong side of the fence when it comes to the right side of donuts. He's at least here in the studio. Thanks for joining us, DC.
Thank you, Xander. Yeah, cool to be here.
Yeah, so the cooler part of eKartingNews is here with us tonight.
Younger, too. Well, not so much anymore now.
I had a thought coming over across that this was probably going to be one of the higher age averages shows we've done in a minute. But I wasn't going to say it until that point now.
That's true. Yeah.
In any case,
nice.
We got a lot of cool stuff we're going to get into with these guys here tonight. I figured it'd be something cool. Obviously, throughout this year, we've done a lot of collaboration with Dave and Rob at all the major SuperKarts USA events. That continues into Supernats 25. They're bringing a bunch of stuff. We're doing a bunch of stuff all together on the broadcast. eKan Radio will have the audio stream as well for you guys going down the road, which will be cool. Dave will be doing a bunch of coverage, and we'll get to learn a little bit more about and give a little more perspective for some of you guys on what they do, especially what Dave does throughout the day, because I don't think a lot of people understand what Dave does throughout some of the weekends. You see him running around, but he's a pretty busy guy. And Mike, obviously, as well, was our only one on this panel here that was at the ROK Vegas event last weekend. So as we get to talk about some of the talking points there, we'll get into that. But first, there was some news, of course, that broke over the course of the last 7 days. As always, we want to keep everybody informed and let you guys know what's going on. If you haven't kept up already, Dave does an awesome job, along with Rob and everybody at eKan, and a lot of the headlines sometimes go through them before anybody else. So he already knows everything that I'll say here coming up, or most of it. But there's cool parts that we have to talk about, and we always like to give love to everybody. So first up, SKUSA Winter Series. This was a talking point that we love to play on this show. It's almost kind of like guessing the stock market, like I like to call it, of what the series look like, what the turnouts look like, where everybody goes throughout the year. They announced on their website they are going to double Homestead for 2023, which is leaving just the ROK Winter Tour as one of the final major series that we don't know exactly the locations of where everything will fall for next year. We had talked a lot and have hyped up and continue to hype up the ongoing progress at PK Race Park. For those of you that maybe haven't followed all the progress that we've done on this show, this is a new Florida track coming to town. It's about 15 minutes north of where the old Palm Beach International Raceway car and go-kart track was. Paving, obviously, as you can see, is done. This is actually from a couple weeks ago. I saw today on Instagram, one of their stories had as well the tire, some of the barriers and soft walls around the outside of the track had already been laid out. Curbing's down in a bunch of places, so it's even more clean than even the sandier look there was going to be. And we had some kind of questions. We haven't had any of the representatives from the PK track on this show as of yet, or talked to directly on a consistent basis throughout each week on the updates on the progress. But initially, there was some rumblings throughout the park of all that they do there. I mean, they do paintball. They've done off-road dune buggies to kind of get the racing side going until the track permits and paving and everything could come together, of whether or not this would end up being a racetrack that would hold club racing, that could even hold bigger and bigger national events. It looks like that's going to be the case. They've got the paddock space, it seems like, so that still puts it as an oddball option potentially for a Florida Winter Tour date on the ROK Cup USA side of things. Unfortunately, it won't host any of the SKUSA Winter Series dates, but it's good for that state to be getting another racetrack back after losing PBIR. We've covered the progress of the Anderson Race Park guys as well with their paving project that's done. So the Florida scene looking good with the addition of another track in a pretty key market in that West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, North Miami area to complement AMR Motorplex and Homestead, which also was doing some track maintenance and construction today that we'll have a little more intel on probably after Supernats to show what they've done down there, because they're always doing a couple cool things, not only before SKUSA Winter Series and the SSKC Series in December come to town. This is kind of their lull part of the year when everyone goes over to the West Coast to Las Vegas, is when the Homestead guys can get a little bit of stuff done and then get ready for everybody to go over to Miami to kick off the 2023 National Pro season in the winter of next year. The other track that we've talked a lot about, hyped a lot about, is Dallas Karting Complex. I completely forgot about them on our last show to mention them. They've got, as you can see, pavement done and the track open. They've already had a club race on it. They've had test days on it. So this is part of a two-phased expansion plan. You can see there's older pavement on the right-hand side. That's the other half of the new track expansion that they're going to be eventually ripping up and paving to make two fully independent racetracks with the option to connect them in the center. You can kind of see the dirt patch there already starting to make way and get ready for paving to connect them both. So it'd be an over a mile long layout when you put them all together if you want to run a full masterclass national event back at DKC, which hasn't seen a major event since the SKUSA Pro Tour and the US Open days in the mid 2010 range. So another track in the Texas area, which obviously we've got the TSRS series, Southwest Regional Cup series now as well, and a lot of healthy club stuff. So cool stuff around the country, because obviously it's not always great in the sport. It kind of ebbs and flows a little bit. Mike Smith, Mr. GM over at Cal Speed Karting, unfortunately won't be a track that we'll have next year. But
we're heavy on the ebb right now.
Yeah. But thankfully there's other parts around, and obviously, Mike, you're a standout guy. We've got you for Supernats, so we're stoked to have you, but no question that it'll all land out good. And then the last state that I have that I forgot to put the graphic up for is the Miami Grands for 2023, set for middle of July, I believe the July 13th to the 16th. So that moves that date kind of back into the summer as the USPKS schedule has them going to GoPro what would have been just a week or two before the Grands from this year. Going back to the summer, honestly, kind of feels a little more like what that event really should be with the way that it worked out this year versus last year. The night racing got pretty cold at night. And to be honest, the crowd turnout for the shootout races and the rental shootout races was a little bit lighter, not because they weren't as fun to be around, but it got down to about 40 degrees, which is pretty cold for us Southerners. All right, Dave, that's a little bit chilly for us to hang out on nonetheless.
Yeah, it certainly is. Not to mention having it in October, all these kids are on school schedule to where if you have it in the summertime, they're up all hours of the night. And so they, the parents are trying to get the kids back to the hotel. And because again, a lot of the spectators are kids, all the cadets, junior kids, they all got to go back to the hotel and get to bed.
Yeah. So I think it'll work out better. It's a cool show, and it just kind of, again, another date that kind of fills up what's a very busy national schedule, as it has been for the last few years. And Dave's been fighting the good fight, I would say, on the column card articles you put out about all that.
Yeah, unfortunately, it falls on the same weekend that Andy Saisman's going to be doing his event at Pat's Acres, which will be that same weekend. So unfortunately, eKartingNews will be up at Pat's Acres. I bet Mike Smith is going to be back up there trying to get possibly another ROK Vegas ticket as well, too. So, but again, a majority of the people that go to the Miami Grand Nationals are not the same people that would go up to Pat's. It's more of the Western side of the spectrum in terms of karters, and Andy's really going to promote this event to be bigger and keep it going throughout the year. And he's been trying to jostle, that date around to make sure it doesn't land on something else. And unfortunately, this event falls on top of it.
Yeah, we talk ebbs and flows, right, on the sport. This is there's almost like the ship always kind of rights itself, or it seems like sometimes we get like 90% right, and then we kind of go backwards a little bit. But and
Andy did a great job of working all the organizations for the winter program, because everything all the way up through basically April and May, we don't have any of the major events in terms of the winter series programs or any of the start of the national programs during that time on top of each other. Yeah, there might be some regionals or club races here or there, but we can't make everything perfect. But at least at the national side of things, you have a lot of the same people doing mechanics going to all the events. You have a lot of the staff members that go to multiple races on the same month. So it takes up a lot of time and a lot of air miles to make sure it all happens. And so Andy worked really well with Tom Kutcher and Neil at SKUSA, along with Garrett Potter and Mark Coates at USPKS. So I think and again, also we're still recovering from COVID, so thankfully we don't have the Supernats in December because it gives everybody a little bit of a break in December to kind of regroup and recharge for what will be a busy 2023.
Yeah, I mean, we got hyped up almost coming out of the gate from COVID, and then now I think we have a lot of super regional events. We don't have
Yeah.
a ton of regional stuff, but we don't have a small number of true distinguished nationals beyond really the Supernats, and then you could count ROK Vegas at nearly 400 entries at it. It in how it all will shake out still is unknown. And I said on last week's show, for the viewers that we have returning, there's a lot of unknowns next year with a lot of people doing a lot of different things of how it all really comes to shape the sport moving forward, which is one of the talking points that we'll have a little bit later in the show. But Dave, before we get into all the industry stuff, and Mike, I want to give you a little bit of time to kind of give some background on yourself too. But I thought it'd be cool to have everybody, get to learn a little bit. What's your daily, day schedule on a race weekend, because you're running around so fast? So could you lay out something like that from start to finish all the way to the final, recap article at the end of the day or next morning?
Are you talking Supernats or are you talking regular race? Because
you could talk Supernats if it's more. I don't know what else. I know Rob wants to keep a little bit kind of, hey, this is going to be a super secret surprise, but cool extra piece of content for Supernats. But you could do Supernats in the past.
Well, it's going to be obviously a little different this year with you guys, providing the full video coverage. You're taking Mike, you're taking Rob away from me. So it's a little different in that terms. But, we've added Nate Dean on board in June. And so, we're going in now with 3 staff members rather than just me and Rob going in. So, but typically it's, we're trying to tell over 500 different stories, and it's hard to tell them all. But we want to try and give every little bit of insight we possibly can from sun up to sundown and beyond sundown, obviously in Vegas, depending on how the schedule goes. Basically we get set up once warm up begins to kind of get our laptops going, get the live timing going, get all our audio equipment ready to go. That's basically number one on a race day or qualifying day, get that going. Again, we do all the top 10. So I go out, I shoot every session to try and get a photo of the top driver in that session, run up to the laptop, put it to commercial, and then go edit, type out the top 10, edit the photo, put it up on social media, get the broadcast back going live, and then head back down for another session. So essentially it's just a repetitive, almost like driving. It's really a repetitive motion that I've gotten used to over the last, 18 years. But Vegas is certainly a different monster. We're up in that tower. There's a lot of obstacles to go around, and it's not easy crossing the racetrack. So that's one of the hard issues. But again, we're just trying to tell the story of the day. You got qualifying on Thursday is it's exciting during the session, but after that, it's kind of like, okay, let's just go talk to them and see what they think. So it's a little bit more laid back day, but Friday and Saturday are hardcore days with a lot of racing and a lot of different stories unfolding. And then come Super Sunday, it's just the main event. So it's focusing on that, focusing on all the different stories. I'm trying to tell Rob certain scenarios or different drivers moving up through the field. Thankfully now with Race Hero and the SKUSA app, we're able to see, the hard charger. Before we had to go back to the grid paper sheets and kind of do the math, like how many positions this guy's gained and stuff like that. So technology has certainly helped. 2004 was my first SuperNationals. I mean, I think back then we had the Game Boys that had the iCard. I think maybe that was the only live timing we had. And
That's awesome.
We actually did handheld recorders, and we did that 2005, 2006, and 2007. But we only did it for Super Pro. So because it's a lot for Rob to hold the hand recorder and the microphone for the PA, so it was a lot. But yeah, so all the technology certainly has changed the way things done. Obviously, with the live coverage you guys are doing, we started doing the audio, the Michael Schumacher year, 2009. That was the first year we actually did live audio, and that just kind of changed the way we did the event and how we did our coverage trackside for a lot of the different events.
It's crazy how it's morphed, right? And you guys did podcast back then, and then paused for a bit, right? And then the podcast era all of a sudden is taken back over the last few years, right?
Right. Yeah. 2005, we were doing podcasts. We were at, I think the first couple of ones we did Stars of Karting, which was the Bobby Rahal and Paul Zalud series owned program in Austin. And the actual racetrack was at the airport there in Austin, Texas. And it was a unique facility, but it was really cool. We did a podcast there. It was actually with Rodney Berryhill's tent. We called it Happy Hour. So Happy Hour with Howden, because Howden was the host. I just kind of did the production. I kind of chimed in here and there. We also had Tim Blaney, who was this Supercard Illustrated editor at the time. So they kind of what you guys do every show is just kind of talk about what's going on. And we kind of focused on that weekend. And then we did one at the SuperNationals that year, right there on the front straightaway in the dark. I think we had Ron White, Alan Rudolph, and then possibly somebody else on the show. And so we did some happy hours after that, 2006, maybe a little bit in 2007. And then it got kind of, again, there was no platform. You had to go to the website and you had to download it and listen to it through the website, now with, the way podcast platforms are exploded, it's certainly a great avenue to expand the reach of our sport.
Yeah. I mean, this alone, right? What you guys have done, what we're doing here, it's the reach always is funny to see. And it's been something that's been eye-opening for us, right? Going to the racetrack and then, hearing the feedback from people you've never met, that feel
Right.
like they get to know you so much better through the longer form conversations. When we talk podcasts, obviously we're in the shirt, Mike. We can't leave you out with everything that we're going. But your whole deal with Fullcaster podcast, that's obviously a passion project of yours. It started, and can you walk through a little bit of the inspiration for that too?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, myself and Derek Escabel started the Fullcaster podcast. Actually, our plan was to do it prior to there even being a pandemic. But then when the pandemic happened, we had a lot of time on our hands, and so we grabbed some gear. And at the end of the day, it started with we had CalSpeed Live, which is just CalSpeed, like a monthly deal where we would talk about what's happening at CalSpeed. And we're like, man, we really like talking to people and about what the hell's going on in the sport and at CalSpeed specifically. And it kind of morphed into like the origin stories of people in the sport. And yeah, to your point, it's 100% a passion project. And it's just really cool to talk to people about, what the hell's going on and how they came up through the ranks. Everyone's got a different story. And I go back and listen to them myself. I mean, I by the time they go out there to the public, I've already listened to them about 3 times via editing and stuff like that. And yes, there's some long ones in there, Sean Buer.
Yeah.
But it's so much damn fun to hear everyone's story, and I hope it's something we can do for a long time.
Yeah, I hope so. That was another question because you was on CalSpeed property. So is
Right,
that confirmation? We'll still get to have that thing going with the way everything shakes out for you next year?
Well, I don't know how it shakes out, to be fair. It's not slated to be in the SoCal region. I'm actually looking to move to Vegas. So I don't know, how we're going to do that. If we're going to try to plug in about 10 interviews during the time of ROK Vegas and Supernats every year and shoot them out there at once. But I mean, Derek and I love doing it. It's just about time, and honestly, it's about getting the guests in person. I'm a big fan. The technology keeps getting better. Like even this right here, the quality is so much better than it was just a couple of years ago with these kind of online calls and things like that. So it's there, but there's something different about doing it in person, and every single one of ours has been in person, and it's something we really like to do and keep doing. But how to get everybody at the same place at the same time is going to be the challenge.
Yeah, no, I fully agree, right? I did a few on my own, in the little bit when we started last year and in the year before a little bit. And the conversations can flow, I feel like, a lot better. Sometimes the only downside of these online calls is they seem like it's always a little bit forced, it's still not the extra bit of chemistry and being in person's huge, it makes it that much more impressive when the online shows can do, really good conversation and have like a really good flow back and forth between everybody and so on. So That brings us with the online show to our first commercial break and a good little segue. When we come back, of course, we do have a lot we want to get into. I wanted to give at least a little bit of time, though, to introduce to you guys these awesome guests that we have on here, because we've had so many superstars we've got to feature on this show and got to meet in our short time so far in the sport. But there's a lot of current events to talk about moving forward. There's obviously a big race that happened over last weekend with ROK Vegas. Mike was there. We're going to chat a little bit about that and a few more things that we have kind of slated on the table a little bit later in this show. As always, when we have our guests on, we don't know when we get them on next. So if you have any comments, questions, or a little bit of criticism, we'd love to show that on the screen as we keep an eye on the live chat as well. We'll be right back after this first break here with Mike Smith, David Cole, Aaron Hackmeister, myself, Xander Clements. We'll see you guys after the commercial break.
Kart Store USA is a kart parts supplier that racers and retailers can count on when they need reliable advice and service. We focus on servicing all racers with honesty and pride while maintaining customer satisfaction. We carry a full stock of Kart Republic and Tony Kart chassis, as well as IAMI and Vortex ROK engines. We've also got a host of other parts available and in stock, such as products from Rev Performance Materials, Jecco Racing Seats, and more. We have a 100% satisfaction guarantee, and on top of that, if your order exceeds $200, shipping is on us. Check out all we have to offer today by visiting us online at kartstore-usa.com.
At New Gen Motorsport, we're committed to using our 10-plus years of experience and knowledge to help grow the sport of karting from the bottom up. Our goal is to make karting more accessible to the average person, lessening the financial burden of getting started, and making the learning curve as small as possible. Our passion is training and developing drivers, mechanics, and engineers to not only be the best they can be in karting, but also for careers in the much larger world of professional motorsports. A strong foundation makes building bigger easier. Let us be that foundation for your karting and motorsports career. Be part of the new generation of motorsport. Contact us today to schedule your test day, arrive and drive race event, or to inquire about how we can help get you started in your own new gen racing kart.
Don't settle for a national engine builder. Take care of yourself with an international one. SRP Engines is a global industry leader in engine services, specializing in engine formulas such as KZ, OK, OKJ, and Mini 60. SRP Engines is the engine of choice for Magic Kart USA and helped power North America's #1 ranked pro shifter driver AJ Myers to the 2021 SuperKarts USA Pro Tour National Championship. SRP Engines can also service any spec engine class of your choice, including IAMI and ROK divisions. However, if you're looking for the absolute choice when it comes to KZ shifter engines, there is nobody better. For more information, contact Amar Sanada at srp-engines.com. KC Happy Hour is proudly presented by the ROK Sonoma Karting Championship, presented by Cameron Race Promotions, the most competitive Northern California karting series. Featuring a 2-day format with practice on Saturday and racing on Sunday, multiple track configurations, and a massive prize structure including tickets to ROK Vegas, race car test opportunities, and race rewards. ROK Sonoma is the training ground of multiple national karting champions each year and race car champions as well. Featuring a full ROK Cup USA class structure with each race weekend streamed live via YouTube, it's a series you cannot miss. For more info, check us out online at zanzarukarting.com. Welcome back, everybody, and one good part of having a lot of fast friends around the industry. And speaking of technology, I just got a text from one of the banners that was over from the ROK race this weekend. I was mistaken. ROK does have their Florida Winter Tour schedule all together. It is going to kick off at the date. The dates were already set. January, February, March is normal. January officially with the banner. Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg, Florida, going back there, same location as last year. They will be going to the PK Race Park in West Palm Beach, Florida, so that will be round number 2, and then round 3 at Orlando Kart Center, bucking right up to that U.S. Pro Kart Series event like it was in 2022. So there we go. Another few dates all locked on in. So PK Race Park will officially be on the national schedule in 2023 with the ROK Winter Tour. Takes away one of the temporary racetracks, which, Mike, thoughts on the layout from having driven it this weekend from another temporary racetrack we put together? This one looked like it had, honestly, I think the one thing, talking to a few drivers I got to chat with over the course of the day, was they felt like it was a little more technical than the ROK Vegas track had been in years past, and that was kind of one of the pushes that they wanted to see. So what was your take on it?
I don't know if it was more or less technical. I mean, there was different bits about it. I talking to some of the different drivers in the different classes. It was pretty damn racy, with the exception of shifter. The shifter guys are having a bit of a hard time with passing, it sounded like, and it's just because the runs from one corner to the next, even though there was some hairpins and some hard braking zones, because the shifter can obviously go straight to the apex and downshift and go from there. The point shoot aspect made it tougher for those guys. But I'll tell you right now, 100cc, I think we passed in every bloody corner, mate. It was awesome. And even the GP guys seem to be getting the job done. The track was pretty fun. Had a nice little technical section in the first bit, a little bit of an S's into a nice right-hander, and then unlike last year, where it seemed to be like a mirror from one side to the other and just be like hairpin, double apex, it had a nice little mix. So it was a lot of fun. The surface, a little bit more consistent than what we had last year, obviously with a fairly beat up Planet Hollywood surface. It's been, cracks and things. We're doing a lot of work to try to fix stuff. So the Rio, being paved not terribly long ago, was a little more consistent that way.
Yeah, that's been the shifter comment's been the same thing whenever we've had those guys on the show, right? And we've kind of gone over, stuff from a track layout they like, some from a track that layout that they don't like. They definitely aren't fans of the double apexes, right, where the shoot down on in. And I think the only thing that, from what I could tell from the way that layout was set up, was that it was still shooting them off to kind of corner entry, because it was a lot of switchbacks back and forth, which you'll have from a temp track because you don't want to waste any space and you're kind of landlocked to the block that you're in. But like, for example, the corner by the scale tower, or the scale entry, right? Like that right-handed hairpin looked on paper like it'd be a really good hairpin, but even the single speed guys, you weren't always going all the way out to the barrier to set up for it. So if you're not going all the way out to set up for the corner, the shifter guys won't even go anywhere near as wide as you guys will on the momentum side.
Yeah, and that left-hander that you're talking about, I think it was 11, was flat out for the 100cc. I heard it was flat out for damn near everybody, actually. But no, you did not need to go all the way to the right, and it still was a good passing zone. I mean, that was a spot where I was watching the Masters final, and yeah, it's still one of the best passing zones. But to give the shifters a really good shot at it, you need there to be a compromise. Like, there has to be a negative to run in that tight line and be able to hit the gears like that, or at least a positive to run the outside. And it was a little bit tougher at the Rio for those boys to get it done, but they still put on a hell of a show.
Yeah. Dave, what do you think from seeing, layouts year after year? Are there any points from when you talk to those shifter guys? Because to me, that's something that's always boggling my mind, because they complain about every temporary track we go to, right? And that's understandable, because it's the hardest class to pass in, because you have gears, because you have front brakes, and you can go in deep and, kind of close a guy off a little bit. But, in your case, what kind of corner designs do you feel like, if you have any, the shifter guys like or don't?
Well, I think the one thing that'll separate them, like at Cal Speed, is a big sweeper. I mean, you got to be able to turn the cart while keeping the throttle down. I think that's one of the biggest things in a shifter cart that's hard to do. And it separates the good drivers from the bad drivers. Anybody can dive in deep, brake, and then turn, point, and shoot. That's not hard. That's why I hate seeing hairpins all the time. I would, like you said, I would much rather see double apex corners, or at least multiple apex corners all in one segment, to kind of help separate the drivers a little bit. But you still got to have that long straightaway, because they still want to hit that 90 miles per hour at the end of the straightaway. So they want to be able to get that dyno pull they've been working on for the last month and a half. So it's a tough thing to do, because you are landlocked. You have what you have, but some of the older layouts for Supernats, had a big sweeping corner in the middle there, to where it brought everybody back. And again, not necessarily a hairpin, but, something between a 90 and a 180. That's, again, where you have a unique exit point. And if you go tight on the entry, it's going to hurt you on the exit, to where a guy on the outside can over under it really quick. So different radius corners, certainly. If you keep going with 90s and 180s, it's easy to build, but it doesn't provide a challenge for you.
Yeah, and to add to that too, I mean, one of the things that you see at like a Supernats that they've had the last several years is they had the long run, the 90 left into the hairpin, which is essentially turn 1, if you will, or turn
Right.
2. That gives them an opportunity to go from the highest of speeds to the lowest of speeds. So even that tighter turn in, you're still going to see some passing. Versus this year's ROK layout, it was an S section at the end of the highest speed scenario. So
Right.
again, low speed stuff, great technical deal. We were able to pass in that scenario. Shifters, it's a little bit more single file.
Yeah, makes sense. Well,
so do we almost think that they're falling into too much of like the same sort of pattern every year with designing these tracks now? We're doing the same thing too much because maybe it worked once and keep trying to redo it. It's like F1 with all these Tilke circuits. Everybody says they're like exactly the same feel and all that stuff. So we need to do, from what Dave is saying, at least we need to really change up how we're making these and throw something way different at the drivers for presumably the next year.
It depends on the amount of barriers you have too, because I don't know how many ROK Cup has. I know SKUSA has a limited amount, so you can only build a track a certain length and be able, because you're limited on the amount of barriers. So I don't know if that's an issue, because I've never talked to Garrett Potter about that, because I've only been to ROK Vegas one time, and even again, that layout was very similar to what we've seen in the past. So again, take a couple people from the industry or a couple drivers from the past, like SKUSA has done before, and try and create, you have now 12 months before ROK Vegas happens again. We know it's going to be at the Rio again, according to, their long-term deal with them. Why not, right now start mapping out different layouts, different ideas, different thoughts on how you can utilize the entire area? Because again, we have a lot of paddock space that, can be used for paddock, and the track, a lot more pavement that can be used for track. So it depends on the amount of barriers you have. But I think now is the time you start mapping that idea out. It's hard though, because they got to design a track for St. Pete, and luckily they only have one temporary circuit this year, so I guess that helps. But you got to start planning now.
Yeah, and to add to that too, I mean, when again, Cal Speed, we had certain areas that were paved or slurried or what have you, like the track proper. But man, with the the arrive and drive carts, man, I had a bloody parking lot. I could do what the hell I wanted. So I did all kinds of stuff just to try it out and test stuff out. And you are limited by your barriers. You're limited by obstructions, right?
Yeah.
And there are light towers. There are different things that you have to watch out for. And there's the other thing about Rio too that's a little bit interesting. It's not, there's a flat section, right? But then you have definitive barriers or delineation lines, whether it be a ramp up to one area. We've all gone up and down the ramps to get to the fuel area or what have you, right? So there's certain things that are just kind of stuck. And then when you're actually designing a course, sometimes stuff just works. And you're like, oh, I don't really want to give that up because it works so damn good. And I think that's also partly why you see this 90-degree long straight to a hairpin thing mimicked year after year after year, because it works. We switched directions this year, still worked. It was still good. So it kind of forms this baseline of what you're going to build. And I know that when I've built new tracks from scratch, it's you find something that you really want to have. You want to have a long run. And the nice thing about that 90 is it lets you kind of extend the straightaway. The straightaway can only be so long, but if you have a fast corner after it, it's a little bit longer. So I think that's why we always see that. They when SKUSA went to was it the convention center, they had more space, so they were able to make longer runs without having that same kind of scenario. So you're kind of dictated to by the space you have, and then again, there's certain elements that are just locked in. This long straightaway, these high speeds, it's an unlock. So you kind of go, all right, plug that in. Now what do we do after that? It's a little bit new and different.
Makes sense. And we'll get to see a little bit of it for Supernats for the first time, going back kind of the direction that it went in that 2011, 2012 to like 2014 era at the Rio, where the track was going back the way that we're going this year. We have that classic end of the straightaway kind of dog leg hairpin that always seemed to provide some really good passing opportunities, just because it was, again, it wasn't a full 90 in, but it was fast enough that you would kind of hit it and then swing out for the corner, right? So anything that just, it seems like, pushes those guys naturally out more versus sending them from the previous corner down to the inside, where they're going to have to, go out of their way to open up for the corner, right? I think that was, to me, the thing that made the most sense of what I could pull out of talking to guys like Jake French and AJ Myers and Formal that we've had on the show and explained it, what they've seen from the driver's seat, and then obviously what we can see from the spectator side to try and make it to put on a good show. Cause it's always, again, the trickiest class to make sure that the track races well. It's a whole, to almost, you want to design the track almost not fully for them, because you do it fully for them, like the Westgate in the very first rendition. We had a 180-degree first corner that was terrible for the single speed guys, and we had fights in the X30 LCQ. We had, crashing there every corner, and we lost probably 5-10 guys on the start of almost every race. So you can't fully go to what those guys want, but for, outside of making the start safe, which again, we'll see what that looks like this year, going back to that direction. Cause in that 2012 to 2014 era, with the starts going into that dogleg hairpin, it was a little bit sketchier for the single speed guys. Granted, pre-pushback bumper, so that adds a little bit to maybe clean that up. And from what we've seen, I mean, it at least going backwards at Newcastle with a little bit narrower track and especially narrower exit hasn't been too bad for the single speed starts going that way. So
yeah, no, that's a great example. That's basically what that corner is going to look like, because I think it was all the way back to 2010 that we were, maybe 2009, that we had that layout. I think 2008, when first year we went back to the Rio, it was this weird layout, but it still might have had that long back. Oh, it's actually a bus stop back there because they had a new pavement section in there. So we did a bus stop section. And then I think 2009 is when they did that type of hairpin. But again, it's not a full 180. It's, it's between a 90 and a 180. So it makes it a little bit, if you run it tight, you're going to lose that momentum coming out. And you can run on the outside. Hell, that was the same corner that we saw Josh Lane spin in the rain, grab the clutch, and power away, and still pass two people.
Yeah, which was just crazy, man. One of the coolest moments, right? That would have been so cool. That, I mean, it was. Thank God someone got it on their phone from the grandstands, because I mean, imagine, I think about.
I think it was from the parking ramp.
Yeah. I mean, they're way back there, and you could still, that's why it's exciting for us to get to go there and have the live stream this year, and then we have that live stream archive from the last couple of years of Super Sunday. That you have these crazy moments from the biggest race in the world. And now we're getting them captured in all kinds of new ways. I mean, imagine if we would have had a broadcast by anyone of that Nicastro, Dave Serra tag senior final, man. I mean, that would have been just insane. And I'm stoked for that, to see what it'll look like. And especially just, it'll feel like a stadium section coming to the checkered flag this year, with the VIP suites, the Jumbotron there, the grandstands right around it, coming to that last corner hairpin. I mean, that's going to be such a big run to the line, I think, compared that we haven't had going the other way for so many years, that we'll get to see now, which will be really, really cool.
Do we know, is the scoring loop where it was the previous years, or are they putting it on the longer straight? It's still where it was the previous years. Okay.
Yeah, so the starts will be on the longer straight. Scoring loop, same space, means that we'll have a little bit, the drivers will be going away from us for the finish. So, Dave, to get the cool finish shots, and all the other awesome media people there, will need to make sure that they're on that little sidewalk kind of around if they want to get a look coming to the driver, or the driver coming at them. But yeah, the finish line is pretty much identical to where it's going to be. The facility layout's the way it's going to be too. That's the other thing when we talk about track design that's so crucial to an event like this, an event like ROK Vegas, is, I mean, they want to have a good paddock flow. From like the first time that they went to ROK at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, the one complaint and the big storyline really that I wouldn't say overshadowed the race, but the biggest thing people were complaining about wasn't anything about the race, which could have been better, could have been worse, was because the grid was at one end of the racetrack, the scales at the other, and so the mechanics were more tired than the drivers half the time of having to push their stands all the way down, push them all the way back. And here we've got a really good flow where it's going to end up being right together again. So that's crucial too, having timing and scoring in a key spot. It'll be probably not too tough for them, because timing and scoring, the crucial part obviously is seeing the start finish line, but also having it where it's like the next corner or there's a little straightaway gap where they don't pass, because when everybody forgets to put their transponders in their registration properly, and the timing and scoring person starts pulling their hair out trying to figure out who's who, they've got the door getting beaten down by the crazy dads and moms and tuners saying, why is my transponder not working? And it's like, well, you may have put the wrong number in, and we're trying to figure out who you are, but your guy is passing 3 people right before the loop and passing 3 other people right after the loop, so we don't know who's who because nobody has the right thing on. So at least this year too, it'll probably be a little bit easier for them having that timing loop going into that flat out 90, which probably you won't really see a whole lot of passes coming out unless you're getting crossed over, and then that long straightaway there'll be single file. So with a guy up in the air, for that 5 to 10 seconds after they cross the loop, you won't see a pass, and it hopefully will make things a little bit easier for those guys and girls in the timing and scoring loop. From the ROK Vegas event, there were 2 things that I wanted to touch on while we had everybody here from the show, and talking about, again, big moments, right, that just get bigger and bigger the more coverage a sport has and blows them all up. We've had teams, maybe nobody to the degree that Rawlson Performance Group has had success-wise in such a short period and back-to-back streaks of winning. But we've also never had the coverage of everybody together, showing that to the world of how well these guys are doing. And without question, it's made everybody jealous in the paddock. And this weekend, I got to give kudos to them, right? Because Ryan Norberg, Nate Cicero on Speed Lab engines, rented from someone else, took them into their own tent, tuned the carburetors themselves, came out, worked hard, won on Sunday again, which, I wanted to just take a moment to give them a little bit of love, because, you can't just say it's because they have their own in-house secret engine program that nobody sees, because it was from outside. And the Speed Lab guys have really good power. It's not they do an awesome job, and they've been they probably should have won the event last year with Jack Jeffers in ROK Senior in the same way. But with about 5 laps to go, his radiator mount broke, started slapping the left rear tire, and he got run back down. But they had a winning driver there last year again. But then we have them on one end. And then on the other end, the shifter race, granted, it was tricky for them to pass, but the pass for the win ended up with a little bit of controversy because, we only knew about it again just from Facebook posts going out, which it used to be how more the way would go. You'd read something Dave would say, and you'd learn that way through Dave and Dave's eyes. And now there's social media as well, which always is, I'm not going to say always middle of the road. Basically, for everyone that doesn't have everyone totally tuned in on social media, there was a yellow flag in the section coming up for wreck on the exit of a corner, and AJ Myers was going in, from the way he described it, to the turn with the lead, saw the yellow flag up ahead. Granted, it was in the center of the corner from the way he describes it. And again, we're going solely off of hearsay here, but that's not so much what I want to get into. I just want to lay out the context of it. Goes in, sees the yellow up ahead, doesn't think it's a passing zone. Marian Kremers, who've been trying to pass him the whole race, gets by him there. Then they hit the yellow, then the wreck, and then the race stands as is. Marian is the winner, AJ second. So the question not so much is on the race event, because we don't really have a whole lot to pull from besides what everybody's stories were and where the yellow flags was and an eyeball review. We have Mr. Mike, who was there. Mike, I wasn't going to put you on the spot, Mike, but if you want to have some thoughts on, here, Mike, what do you think?
Well, actually, I had my own yellow flag situation. I had a big run on the straightaway in one of the heat races. I think it was the 3rd one. I was passing for the lead on Ben Cooper, and we were approaching the kink, the right at the end of the straight, which is turn 1, and which is right where the yellow was. It's my understanding as a driver that you can do whatever you want as long as you get the job done pre-yellow, you're okay. And I hadn't got the job done yet, right? So I backed out begrudgingly. I was not stoked about it. And it, what would the race been like had I gotten the lead, whatever. At the end of the day, if the pass gets done pre-yellow, I think you're in the good, regardless of where that the yellow is placed. At the end of the day, the way I understand it is we try to have the yellows, you try to have your corner workers in position pre-braking zone, right? So you are getting a yellow flag before any deceleration, which would pretty much mean an opportunity to pass. As far as the shifter guys go, I mean, I didn't see it firsthand. I was too busy moping about my own race that happened immediately prior. Yeah, it's tough. At the end of the day, if you are able to get the job done pre-yellow or have dominant position, I think you're in pretty good shape. Now it just comes down to how much do you have on the other guy. It's challenging. It's frustrating when you're like, oh, I got this. I know what that's like. It just happened to me. But you gotta give it up if that's the situation. And again, if you assume there's no way they're gonna pass me there, that's 9 times out of 10 where you get beat right there.
Yeah. Dave, that was a big sigh. Did you have something come across your mind and hold back on it?
It's tough because it depends on the way the race is called. What the rules say, how many flagmen do you have out there? Where is a flag displayed for, and where does that caution period begin and where does it end? Because it's not necessarily up to the yellow flag at all the races. A lot of times it's from this point to this point. This is the yellow. When the yellow flag is waving, this is where the yellow flag situation is. But you also have a standing yellow. Standing yellows, if that's displayed, it's not necessary. Is it passing or not passing? Again, it depends on.
That's if there's a yellow flag out, mate. There's a yellow flag out. Standing or not, it tells you how bad the scenario is, and it's usually there's no passing from the yellow to after the incident. That's the fairly standard deal.
But if they're waving
keyword being usually, right?
Usually.
The tricky part is that we're not, and not at you in a bad way, right? Yeah. But this situation highlights to me a bigger talking point, right? Because we all kind of have opinions, and everyone does when it comes to race directing as well. But from everyone, at least from my perspective as a driver and former driver in it all, is I may think we should race one way, or I may think we should race another way, but I'd much rather go in the event, from day one, whether it's a preset booklet or meeting or both, and know what the sandbox exact limits are, right? And I think that in this situation where it gets tricky, and this is something that is not a ROK thing, it's not anything with any series really, but more on an event organization standpoint, there's no designation between what I would call like a runner, who is the guy that's clearing the go-kart off the racetrack, and the flagger or flagger station, right? And granted, someone could take that and run with it and say, well, Xander, you're asking for 300 people on the racetrack. And that's not what I mean, right? We don't need 1 million flaggers. We don't need 1 million runners. You can run with a certain amount. But if, let's say, in the driver's meeting, you know exactly where those flag stations are, those guys are there the entire way, and that designates the zone, then I think you have something a little more kind of cut and dry. Because really what the issue was, and AJ's point, which is, again, a fair argument, he's like, look, as a driver, we were going into the corner, but that's not where my eyes are. My eyes are on the corner apex, and the flagman was waving directed towards the exit of the corner, but he was positioned at the corner apex, and then the second guy had a flag with him while he was trying to clear the go-kart at corner exit, right? Yeah. But there wasn't necessarily a flag station of like where this guy was exactly going to be, so he didn't know when that zone would start, and that's where the judgment call came in on the race director side, which, again, don't envy being in ROK's place either, because they're going to make someone upset one way or another of where they call it. But like when you have it where it's like, well, if you see a yellow, slow down, no passing, I might see that yellow flag 50 feet before David does, right?
Right.
And that's
I think that's the kind of two different ends of the spectrum, right? As a driver, you can only do with what you see. Okay, so there's two different aspects. As a driver, doesn't matter where it's placed, where you see it, that's where it starts. Okay, that is what it is. However, like even at Cal Speed, we're a permanent circuit, right? But it has that street course kind of feel. Working with, say, a Taylor Jocelyn, or with Challenge, or Neil with Pro Tour, or what have you, you always try to put those stations pre-braking zone, right? And they're consistent.
Right.
That's where it is. And there's usually a tire setup or something that designates that's where it is. To your point about runners, etc., if your flagger is a flagger and they do not move, that's the spot. That's their job.
Yeah,
their whole thing in life is to warn a driver of a impending, like my scenario, there was no issue other than there was a couple of people on course that were finishing up fixing barriers, and they had gotten out of the way by the time we got there. Regardless, there was still a yellow displayed. So it doesn't matter about the severity. I mean, standing versus waving. If the consistency is there, is where those stations are. So the argument could be, all right, let's have a standard or at least a transparent piece of the track map that says it's kind of like SCCA, right? SCCA or any other kind of big track. These are your corner stations. This is where the yellows will be displayed, or where the lights will be displayed if we're talking about an F1 or whatever. Now F1 also has a green light that pops up, says, hey, racing is back on, which we don't have in the karting game. But at the end of the day, that transparency, that consistency of this is where they are, they're not moving anywhere, you can count on it. It just eliminates a little bit of a gray area on the driver's side. And the nice thing about the officials, it makes it a little bit more clear cut. This is the zone, whether you like it or not, makes their job easier.
100%. I think, and that's exactly it. If the zones are set, right, and we know where they are, right? I mean, even on the officiating side, like you're saying, you've got them, you set them, etc. But just speaking, it's not like I've shown up to a race before, and if it was a track I already knew, like, yeah, I kind of had an idea of where those corner stations were. But it'd be cool if we had, like, we go, all right, this is my layout and my little entry pamphlet. Here is every corner station that will display a yellow. I won't see a yellow from anywhere else, but if I see it here, it goes from here, from turn 4 to turn 6, right? And then I got to wait till turn 6, and then I get out of there, and it could make things a little bit, awkward. And the street races are always tough because, I think to like motocross like this, right? Because they do it pretty well at the supercross races, but they have like only a couple crashes in a session. For as crazy as the dirt bike racing is, they got less go-karts on track. We have a lot of crashes, at these temp races, and then track repairs that have to happen on the fly like this. Like we have a lot, and that's why SKUSA does double yellow, and full course cautions at Supernats a lot of the time, because it would just be chaos, and yellows every single lap in a different corner. But more than anything, like in a situation like this, it wasn't that they didn't do a bad job of displaying the yellow, which sometimes happens where there's a wreck and the flagger's too busy trying to, keep his head from being scrambled and get the go-kart off the racetrack, forgets to throw a yellow in the air, or the flagger behind him didn't get communicated that the yellow was in the air. In this case, just seems like the drivers were like, one guy saw it, other guy saw it, but thought that it was further away. And in Marian's case, from where everyone else was described, like, I mean, he was, and you look on the results, AJ won every heat, qualified pole, like he was the man, that was his shot. And from a driver's perspective, you don't blame him for doing it, because that was, at that point, you just throw yourself on the mercy of the court and you hope that it, goes your way, because that was the only way it was going to get by him, because AJ had been blocking that corner nicely every lap the way it was designed, and he just didn't that lap thinking it. I talked on this show a few times a while back. We've had Ryan Norberg on the show and Braden Eves, because there was an incident with both of them at a USPKS event 2 years ago that I was on the assistant officiating side. I had flags in my hand, but I wasn't supposed to be a runner. So I guess by that point I was an official and a flagman, if we're going to designate the difference. My runners were struggling to clear the racetrack of two cars that wrecked in the following corner, which I should have stayed and yellowed for, and probably in hindsight and stayed. Instead, I wanted to clear the racetrack for the leader, went to go help the runner to clear the track so we didn't have them blocked on the racing surface, left my post, and then they came by expecting the yellow, knowing the wreck was there. I think he had looked ahead or thought he saw the yellow in the next corner, opened the door, got pushed off, lost the race, lost like 5 spots.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if there's no yellow, there's no yellow.
There was.
Yeah. So if there's think about it, when the wreck first happens, there's no yellow because it's happening currently. So you can pass, you can do what the hell you want to try to avoid the accident or what have you. If the yellow flag person leaves their post, to your point, or what have you, there is no yellow flag scenario. Yes, there's a wreck. Do the best you can, be safe, whatever. But there's no yellow. And I only speak to that as far as penalties, protests, etc. You still want to make sure you're safe. But at the end of the day, as a driver, we're only going to go with, it is green flag unless you tell us otherwise. And if there's no yellow, it's game on.
And I will say something that I've really appreciated, having been with the STARS program for the last 3 years. They started developing and brought in last year these like LED light boards that they've been using that are really nice. It reduces, you don't need to have Xander out there holding a flag, doing whatever, and then worrying about that. You just have them there, and you can smoke them too. Like you can hit them pretty hard, and they'll still work. But it's always there. You only need officials there to clean anything up if anything happens. You don't have any judgments of like, were they waving a yellow yet? Were they not? You have one person that sits up in the scoring tower and just controls all the lights from a remote. And that's something that's really nice. I'm not saying SKUSA should or shouldn't do it however they want to do it, but it is something that worked really well in my eyes, having been used them before. I really like those.
We had that at PGP Motorsports Park up there at Paul Zalo's joint. We had those up there, and it's just a awesome extra piece. And if you think about it, actually at these big Vegas events, they have got more facilities to their discretion, right? They've got more people. There should be runners. All they do is pick up go-karts, and then there's flaggers versus, say, a club race where that's the same person doing the same job. So it's the same across the board. You just have to, like, when that flagger is also the runner and they run to the incident with the flag,
that's where we get into trouble.
Sketch, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's where the judgment call really came down to, right? Like, it was in an awkward spot for the drivers to see, and even when they see it, right, like, where does the yellow zone, for example, start, right? If we're talking this
where the yellow flag
straight,
is.
Yeah, okay,
it's
yes,
not good, but that's where it starts.
But point being, like, we've got this super long back straightaway, right? Like, you're going to be able to see the yellow up down at the other end of the racetrack in the very next corner if that yellow's up in that braking zone. So point being, with the judgment call, like, if you're side by side coming out of this flat out 90, or you crossed a guy, coming out, or you're working a pass, let's say coming out of what will now be, I guess, turn 1 by the timing loop here at Supernats, right? And then you can see the yellows coming up. You know that you've got time before then. When does that yellow start? You're seeing it, but you're 1,000 feet back, 1,500 feet back, right? So that, to me, my point out of this, and only just a conversation I think to have of like, well, we've kind of always had it by this, but we've never done it in a way where it's been like heavily defined across the board, or someone's done it so well that everyone's copied, which is another thing that happens. And normally, for the good of the sport, the light system could be a thing with the STARS guys doing it and other guys maybe adopting it in the future. But if the drivers are like, all right, if everybody's on the same page at the end of the day of knowing, yes, okay, the yellow's up there, but it's not where I'm at right now, it does count or it doesn't, like, or if the zones are designed on a map there, and it's like, if the yellow is here, this is what this yellow is for. This is when that zone starts at this first yellow at the end of the straightaway, goes into the next corner, and then you wait, and then there's another flag station, you look for it, right? But I mean, from my experience, I've never had that. At the SCCA events, like you said, where those corner stations are. At a permanent track you go to a lot, where those flaggers are roughly going to be all the time. But at a big race, at a temporary track, you don't know where those corner stations are going to be. We're not going to know where every person's positioned, and they may not even have a great plan before carts get on the racetracks. We like to wreck in places we don't think we're going to wreck when we design racetracks. So they may show up Wednesday and move some runners around or move some flags around. It's not like a bad thing. But if it's defined by the time we get to the drivers' meeting and everybody knows exactly where to look for those yellow zones, I think this situation and future situations and previous ones like it don't happen, because this was like, one driver thought the zone started at one point, another one thought it started with that yellow flag. And that was, Marian's here in the comments as well. And a great point, right? Like, sorry, this is not the comment he had. Here it is. So in his case, he didn't think he was in the wrong because he was ahead by the time they reached the yellow. It wasn't when they first saw it, but by the time the cart hit that first yellow flag, Marian was ahead. Yeah. And again, that's the judgment call that went to the stewards, because we as a sport, we've never defined it. I want to make sure that we're clear on that too, that it's not a knock on the ROK guys, but when we don't have stuff absolutely clear, which is something Dave and I were joking about before we went live on, like, that's the thing that, if we all know what the rules are going in and we get told them, then there's no issue. But when we have those,
we all know what the rules are going in. A lot of this stuff, we still break them.
But we can refine it. Like, this is a situation I think that could be refined to go. Like, we think we know it, and then we get in a situation where I thought I understood it, but he thought it read it this way.
I was making that move on Coop, and I had like the guys back at the I don't know what that is, but I
It's
hate
my
it already.
penalty from cup carts. Okay.
Ah.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Here's a great
see?
example.
Okay.
Listen, okay. Certain series have it where as soon as the green flag waves, you can leave the tram lines, right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that cup carts didn't have that rule to where you had to pass the green flag in order to move outside the tram lines. Well, that's how I got my penalty. Again, that's kind of the problem. And that's why, again, dating back to June when we had a lot of the issues going on with the sport, why we need one single set of rules in terms of safety and in terms of how we race direct races here in the United States. I really believe that because one rule is different here, one rule is different here. It's been decades of WK and IKF when they were the two powerhouses. It's the same thing. It was a certain rule in IKF and there was a certain rule in WK. Now there's a rule in SKUSA, there's a rule in ROK, there's a rule in USPS. That's the hard part is trying to understand, okay, what am I racing this weekend and what do I need to follow? If there's one set of standard rules across the country from the club to the regional to the national level, and even when we have international events come here, that it helps alleviate these types of scenarios and then takes away our hour-long discussion of arguing about it. But again, it depends on how the race director defined everything, and that's what it boils down to. Is the race director saw it as not an issue, and that's the way he ruled it. And it could happen at the SuperNationals on the last lap, and it might be called a different way. We don't know yet. It depends on how they outline everything.
I agree with you, David, but at the end of the day, it's our job to know the rules, right?
It is.
Yeah.
I learned after the first heat.
in Dave's case, right? That was probably a rule in that rule book that Dave maybe just missed reading it page to page. Cover to
I
cover.
completely missed. They said it at the drivers' meeting. I completely missed it there. Everything. And I was just like, and I literally got on my phone, when I got back to the pits and looked it up, and I was wrong. And I'm like, damn, I could have swore I heard them say the other way around. But again, you got to ingrain these things in your head sometimes because as a driver, you're just immediately thinking this way, but it's different depending on where you're at.
Dave, that's not even the worst one I heard from CKNA. So Austin Olds, his mom is the series administrator, and he has worked at CKNA at the North Division races. And he stands on the side of the track at the start and calls tramline violations. Right. And he does that. And so we go to CKNA Grands, first heat Friday, he's in junior. He goes out and he gets a tramline violation. And I'm like, dude, you are the person that makes these penalty calls. How did you get this penalty? And he said, as soon as I got on track, I forgot all of the rules and I just went.
It's the red mist. It's the red mist.
Yeah. I literally, it was in the scale line after our first heat. And I came up to the guys. I'm like, all right, maybe a second. I'll go, I got 2 laps in and realized that I completely forgot about tram lines. So hopefully I didn't get a penalty. I have no idea. Yeah, I got lucky.
There is that'll happen. That's for sure, right? But at least if it's defined, then you don't have any room to stand on them. We don't get into it. And again, like talking about defining, the last thing that we can talk about, right? This is a good comment by Randy Bell from Facebook. What about speed in a yellow zone? One guy slows down, one guy doesn't slow down as much, right? This is the tricky part with what we have, and one thing that again, while we only see it at the Supernats, whether or not we should see it in the short races we have, because it obviously burns the leader, is those double yellows, the slowing down part under yellow, right? We've heard it in drivers' meetings across the board. We kind of go through like ebbs and flows of like sometimes in the sport when we get like on one specific race officiating topic and we hammer it. Right. There was a period where we're like, everyone needs to have their hand in the air when they pass a yellow flag. And if you don't, you're getting a penalty. Right. But it's a sprint race and it's like a warning flag in our sport until we go to full course yellow. We can't expect these guys to slow down. I think that's another thing that's not a gray area that doesn't need to exist, is the understanding, because in every other, form of racing, there's, not every other form, but like F1 has the virtual safety car, right? And then in other forms like, NASCAR, they don't even bother with the local yellow stuff beyond just letting you know there's a spin, right? So I think the general consensus on something like that, Randy, to answer the quick question, and everyone here, I'll open the floor right after, is that technically it's really just to take away passing and racing. But but there's no way with the tech we have right now to officiate any kind of slowing down under yellow, at all.
That's the most important thing right
It would
there.
be-
You can't
go
put a
ahead,
rule
Mike,
into
go ahead.
place that you can't adhere, you can't officiate. At the end of the day, if you can put all the rules out there you want, if you can't back it up by officiating, then you don't have a rule that's enforceable. So, while I mean, it's a good. I mean, Randy's going to be at my my machismo 12-hour here in a few weeks, and I'm sure I'm going to burn him on this one. But all joking aside, yeah, I mean, there's no aside from the obvious. Did you go through there side by side? That's pretty easy. There was a passing scenario there. Aside from that, we don't have virtual safety car. We don't have all these sector times and go back and look at it. And God, could you? I mean, can you imagine a timing person trying to go back through a field of 40 and see if they were slowing that? I mean, at the end of the day, we want it. I agree. You don't want to have people hauling ass through a wreck, right? You just don't. But you still want racing going on. A full course yellow on a turn one only scenario is a bit much. But people hauling ass and trying to make things happen during an actual crash situation. I guess that's the double waving versus the standing. I mean, but there's no way to enforce that one, unfortunately.
I still like the standing yellow idea because I've seen too many times where a corner worker here 3 corners away from the rack is waving a yellow flag.
Yeah.
That corner worker does not need to be waving the yellow flag. Yeah. So he's either has to be a stationary yellow or not at all. Because it's still, again, it should be the corner before should be a standing yellow, and the corner where the incident is taking place is a waving. And again, depending on how you define it, the standing yellow is still caution, but you can still race, to where when you get to the waving yellow, that's when you be aware of an incident and take caution and not pass. So again, it depends on how everything's defined. That's what it boils down to. It's no different than balls and strikes. You have umpires that call balls and strikes certain one way, and you have another umpire that calls it a different way, even though balls, a strike zone should be defined. So it's different no matter where you go.
Yeah, and also remember too that that's one of the biggest challenges for a race director or any official, right? Yeah. I would much rather my corner workers get a yellow out early or too much versus not enough.
Right.
And try to get them to pull it when it needs to be pulled is secondary to making sure the incident's getting taken care of. So the experience of the crew, experience of your corner workers and things like that will amplify how tight and how accurate those yellows are. But to Dave's point, 100%, it's having that 1-3 corner, you're like, you pass the yellow and you're like, where's the problem? I could have made that pass. Yeah, frustrating for sure.
Yeah, frustrating. But at least in that case, right, if we take out the idea that you have to slow down, then it's a less of an issue, as long as we're not harping that they have to slow down when they see a yellow. So
and again, AJ made a mistake. He should have defended. I mean, why not? Why stop defending when you've been defending that corner every single lap? Now, I wasn't there. I don't know if he was doing it every single lap, but I'm pretty sure he ran a shallow line through that corner every single lap.
Yeah, like I said earlier, if you assume you could lose.
Yeah.
You could wave to the guy standing on the sidelines.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that.
Yeah. All I'm saying is, look, man, I think it'd be cool, and I'm talking idealistic, right? I mean, this stuff's tough at a temp track, right? But if we knew where those stations exactly were going to be, where they weren't going to be, so we knew where to look, and then also beyond just knowing where they're going to be, what they mean. Is it when I see it, or is it when I pass it, right? Like, when does my zone start, and then if it's written and I miss it, like Dave with the tramline rule, I'm going to be pissed, but I'll go back, I'll read it pissed off, and then be like, well, I should have read it. I should have known. But it goes back on if we could define it. And I think that would be one thing that to me would be cool is when we go to these racetracks, if there was, we knew where those flags were going to be from our little pamphlet or something going in, and then we had zones defined and explicitly said I think the way that makes most sense is as soon as you pass that zone, then you could be heavy with your yellows, right? But then at least I know, all right, yellow's coming up. It's not here yet. I can sort out what I need to sort out when I get there until I get past the wreck or until I get a station where I pass the next station that is not yellow. Even if it means that we're going to have a couple more corners that I can't pass in, the judgment call stuff kind of goes away if that stuff, just like Dave said, defined, and end of the day with it. So
That's
Moving
certainly going to
on.
apply to everybody
Yeah.
who's got like the racing acumen to understand that too. I'm going to assume our micros, maybe not quite up at the point
But
there.
it's a learning experience, right? Like
Oh,
if
for
if
sure,
it's
Everything's
the
learning.
that's
It's just not
the
going to be
thing, right?
across the
Like
board.
I heard, like going back on Dave's point about like the rule book stuff. There was one dad that was like, man, when my kid was in mini, I used to get mad at, one rule at one series, and I'm trying to teach him how to race, and then we go to another series, and he does what I told him to do, and then he gets a penalty or he gets wrecked because of it. It's like, I used to get mad, and eventually I started calling it a myriad of BS, and that's just what it is. It's just different everywhere, and I just tell him go race and try to, keep his head up. So if we had stuff more standardized and more kind of laid out, then that stuff goes away. I mean, that's just a standard thing I think most race officials would agree with, and we've had them on. We'll probably have to have them on again to talk more about it all, but it's like the less gray area they get to play in, for the most part, works out better. You want to keep almost like a touch of gray area to just scare the drivers sometimes, so that way they don't come into it, because you can't fully block it all out, right? Like there was one time at a regional series that didn't have pushback bumpers I was officiating. I threatened that if I didn't see daylight between the bumpers on the start, I was going to give them 3 seconds, and there was only like 15 of them, so I could see them all, and nobody did it. But if like 10 of them did it, I would have been screwed, because it was just me. So I would have missed a couple, right? But I scared them, and they thought that I was going to do it, and they saw me standing right next to the tram lines when we started, and they didn't.
Were the starts clean?
The starts were cleaned. The scare tactic worked. The scare tactic worked. So you keep some gray area, but this is something that I think is an unnecessary gray area. And that stuff only works too on like certain degrees. Like if I did that to the 40 X30 senior field, that would not work. I don't care how many people I line up on the front stretch. We've tried it before, and there have been penalties before that have taken guys off the podium. And they've been like the only guy penalized for pushing. And it's like, well, all right, that tactic did not work at all, because we all pushed and they missed a lot of us. But with temporary tracks, the other thing that was this week was tricky, right? And Mike, you and I texted a little bit about this, was the barrier delay, right? I mean, this with the wind gusts, this is a constant thing in Vegas. Dave and I, we've seen the water delays from water barriers getting knocked, going on stuff that could be different. I mean, this is something I don't really have the answer to, but I feel like it's something we should ask to continue to try and improve our temporary racetracks, because these are going to be around for a while and are obviously going to keep going. We've got 25 years of almost completely on a temporary racetrack. What can you do different? Is there stuff you can do different? Because the way that we have the tech pros, they're meant to, move and absorb the impact. Mike, from your time working at Cal Speed, you have barriers, but they're backed up. You had tire walls as well. Is there any solution to stuff like that to kind of fighting those wind gusts, or some combination from how we've been doing things you can think of?
To be fair, I don't have a lot of experience at how the Vegas races or these standard temporary ones, like proper temporary courses, are built. At Cal Speed, we had the luxury of we're there more than we're not. So on either end of a Tech Pro band or group, which is 10 to 12 of them, they're actually anchored into the ground, but then in between there's PVC dowels, if you will, that go into the ground. That's a lot of drilling. That's a lot of work. And actually, if anyone who's been to Supernats seen it a few years ago, they'll do a lot of that drilling into the ground and putting PVC into the ground and things like that. And having worked with Stan a bit, with SKUSA, we've kind of gone back and forth about how that could work. At Cal Speed, if you've been there, we do 3 the Scribner barriers as well, and we'll have PVC on either side, and we can handle winds that are in the 15, 20 mile an hour range, and our barriers will stay where they're supposed to be, just with PVC, without any added weight or anything like that. The smaller groups, you have to add some bags of sand or whatever if you're going to get beyond that. Our tire barriers, though, I'll tell you right now, if you get to like a 50 mile an hour wind or whatever, the tents are gone at that point. So it doesn't really matter about the track. But yeah, the track's still hosed. So a full-on temporary deal like this, I mean, I think David's made a lot of points about the water and the barriers, and I can't agree more that if you have a water barrier as your edge, you're playing with fire as far as a long delay. Having them as a secondary piece is maybe something different, but PVC, man, drilling holes and putting PVC in the ground is really your best bet aside from weight, and then trying to be strategic about where you put stuff to hopefully not get blasted all the time, so you don't have to fix the PVC.
Yeah, we played a lot with it at Homestead with the rental track. I think that might be the most engineered rental kart track in the country, or at least one of how we have to do that, because that track is a little lima bean oval. And unfortunately, just by the way the land is and how everything was shaken out, it's the worst thing you could have when it comes to a rental track, because the slowest section and the section that requires the most braking is the last part of the lap from when you leave the pit lane. So when the drivers go out, they're full throttle down a straightaway into a nearly full throttle corner. They come around, do a crazy braking zone. You could put all the braking zone signs you want. People still freeze. They leave the throttle on. They come in and smack the wall. And so
they call that setting yourself up for failure. That's what that is.
not much. I don't think it could have been done different, because either way, the tighter hairpin was going to be at the end of the racetrack that had the pit lane, and it's, you do pace laps and then they still go full speed and hit it. But I got to learn on that front, how we do the barriers. At first, we're like, all right, the barriers are just killing our fence, so we're just going to fill them all with water. And then when we fill them with water, then they bulge, right? Then they don't move at all. The water barriers obviously break, so you can't fill them up too high. But in the similar way to the PVC pipe, we never staked them down, but we'd do probably a quarter water, a third water, and like every third or fourth one, enough where it would still catch the impact, but not enough that they would bulge and break. And for the most part, the water never leaked out, but it was just a little bit of weight in each of those similar barriers. And then the wall itself is now like unbelievably reinforced at the exit of that hairpin corner. It has heavy barriers, 2 stacks of bolted together tire wall that you'd have to pull back, and then fully staked in, or planted in concrete, thick metal fencing posts to catch the tire wall. It kind of works like a safer barrier almost, because the poles are in the concrete, but then there's the chicken wire that's the netting of the fence, and so the tires go in. They don't ever move the poles, but they'll hit the chicken wire, and the chicken wire kind of springs back a little bit.
You said this is the most engineered. I think. Did you know
redneck engineering? Redneck engineering, but
I was gonna say this is typical.
This
is Georgia engineering right here.
Redneck engineering, but I'm just saying that's what rental kart. Well, not every rental kart track is. That's what some rental kart tracks are.
No.
Shut. You have it different. Your rental kart track is a racetrack 99% of the time.
No, I would argue half and half, sir. Half and
half.
Yeah.
Your track's way better though, because you don't have a hairpin as the very last part where the rental people go out there. But it's all right. Redneck engineered. Point being that the barriers were staked. They were never staked down, but a little bit of weight in them, right? And even those they didn't crack. Whereas the highway barriers, it'd be cool to fill them with sand, because then they wouldn't die. But how many dump trucks of sand are we going to need to fill those highway barriers up? You
don't want the weight where the impact's going to be. The impact zone needs to have some flex, so it's on either end of that. And actually, one of the neat, interesting pieces of, say, like the first S section, or that chicane, if you will, at the end of the ROK deal, I don't know that anybody else is paying attention to barriers like I am as a track guy, but there was actually a neat overlap that they did, so that the impact zone would move and pull the barrier, because it wasn't connected to the entire thing. If you connect the entire barriers, it will pull and actually close the previous track zone. So what they had is an overlap. So it would hit over here and it would pull it, or actually the other way, and still have closure. So I thought, I'm looking at that. I'm supposed to be racing, but I'm like, that's a neat track design right there. Anyway, it's just geeking out over, this side of the fence. But what the impact zone should not be rigid. Ideally, you want them to flex. You want them to move on either end. Like your apexes, those would be better to be rigid. If you hit an apex and you bust your cart up, don't hit the bloody apex. SKUSA has curbs for most stuff. ROK only had one curb in the entire place, and they wanted to. It was turn 2, and it was obviously they wanted to have that one stuck. Like that was the definitive part of the corner. Everywhere else, there was either a pin or something like that was holding it in place. But everywhere, like your impact zones should flex. So not having any water, even sand is still going to end up being a problem. We've all been there in the marbles, right? So on either end of the impact zones, your weight, throw some pins in there. They'll break a little bit, and that's a little bit of rigidity that'll help you out without being astronomically a problem if someone blasts through it. So there's some 101 stuff that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if maybe ROK just didn't, maybe they weren't delivered all the barriers they were supposed to, sandbags they were supposed to have or whatever it was, but they obviously got surprised or were not properly set up for the wind. But the rest of the event was on point. There was a water break, wasn't their fault. There was a sprinkler system that went off, not their deal. So, yeah, they did. I thought they did a really good job. Really wanted that last practice session on the end of Wednesday, though, which they hadn't canceled it.
Well, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, the wind thing, it catches you off guard. You're not necessarily prepared for it because SKUSA used to do the sandbags along all the barriers till the wind got so strong, it moved them over the sandbags and blew them off into the racetrack, and we had to red flag the race. So that's when they started staking them in with the PVC piping. But even the strong winds picked them up off of that and then blew them onto the racetrack. So that's when they decided to do the little end caps there to kind of keep them down for when the wind did blow through. But the problem they have now is that they stake them down, like Mike was saying, in the impact zones. They don't need to be staked in the impact zones. They need to be staked everywhere else, and at a certain gap too, because I've seen it a number of times where a cart will hit the barriers in an impact zone, and it'll be like 3 pipes that just get torn completely apart. And it's like the pipes shouldn't have even been there because, again, they have to move with the cart. That's the whole idea of the whole Tech Pro system. But even with the Scribner barriers or the KISS barriers, they all have to move. And so that's one of the key things. But you have to make it to where they don't get blown away. And it's a battle that you got to find the happy medium on that. And like you said, maybe a little sand in like every 5th barrier might help to keep the weight down, because again, if they're in a non-impact zone, it'll help keep the weight on at least that center part of the barrier strip. Or maybe we do flour, so when they hit them really hard, it just blows flour all over the place.
I think that would be the best thing. We just, and then get someone to charge a cleaning station, right? Like a $5, $10. Well, with go-karts, we could probably charge $100 to clean the go-kart properly. But that would be something. But even with like the little bit at the bottom, like it would still move. It just meant they moved a little bit less, so it still kind of caught them at the higher impacts, right? But it wasn't going crazy, and then it also helped kind of keep a little bit of form too, because if you're going to hit them hard enough that they're going to go 100 feet, like you're done, like you're going to break some stuff for sure. So if the barriers move 50 feet instead of 100 feet, I'm talking in hyperbole, but point being, but this is again, a cool point that it's cool to have you on here, Mike, to have another guy on the track design that's less redneck engineered than myself, and I don't call me out on that. Yeah, you do. You do. Well, swap. Yeah, I need to swap. Well, I'm going to get like maybe a touch of red right here and then clean up before Supernats after 3 weeks. So, it won't look like hair. It'll look like I just ate a bunch of Cheetos is what it's going to look like. So we don't do that. We do have a commercial break, and then we come back to answer the last bit of your questions and talk a little bit more, guys. We ran a little bit long, but that's to be expected. We have some awesome guys here with David Cole and Mike Smith, and they'll be right back here after the break. So thanks for sticking with us. We'll be right back.
Line has steadily made progress since its inception in October 2021. On top of servicing the Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana areas with products from Compcart chassis, Tillotson carts and engines, Miami, Briggs, Honda, and more, they're now promoting race events as well throughout the mid and coastal South region at NOLA Motorsports Park and Finish Line Performance Karting in Biloxi, Mississippi. Races are already set for the fall of 2022, September 3rd, October 22nd, and November 12th at NOLA Motorsports Park, and 2 dates, September 10th and October 15th at Finish Line Performance Karting. Driver Line is set to finish this year strong. As the Western importer of the Praga and Formula K chassis brands, Leading Edge Motorsports is a high-performance kart shop and race team with a simple mission: teach others the joy of high-performance driving, supply our customers with the highest quality products and services, and most of all, win races. With our remarkable racing inventory, expert services, and top-ranked national-level team to back it up, we'll help to get your new kart racing package up and running fast. From arrive and drive service to kart preparation and driver coaching to the parts you need to get you back on the racetrack, Leading Edge Motorsports is the industry answer. From 4-stroke to 100cc to 125cc and beyond, Technokart USA has a winning option for you. Based out of Des Plaines, Illinois,
Technokart USA offers both chassis designed to win in all divisions of North American karting and a top-level race support program at the U.S. Pro Kart Series, Route 66 Sprint Series, select Cup Karts North America races, and both the ROK Vegas and SKUSA SuperNationals. Podiums, wins, and championships are waiting for you whenever you're ready to get on a Technokart. For more information, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/TechnokartUSA.
So last little bit before we move on here is we've lost Mike for the moment. Hopefully we'll get him back. The last thing I wanted to have you here while I had you, Dave, and Mike a little bit too, for both you guys, tenures in the sport. We've seen classes kind of come and go. This year has, by the numbers, one of the bigger total numbers of Masters drivers at the Supernats, with the help of Rob and yourself spearheading the K100 Master class. Kids classes are still really good. KA classes are really good. So what's been your take on the entry count? Because it's not like it's total entries bigger than anyone in the past. It's right up there with around the record total when they had the year with Rotax and everything of like 620. What's your thought having seen the full entry list here, Dave?
Well, I have 602 in 2013. That's when we had 12 categories. Now, think about it. 2019, we had 12 categories and we only had 502 entries. So you got to kind of consider how many categories we have at the event. And I think the largest with 10 was 2018 with 544. So we're right about there, if not surpass that. Because I think we have 546 in pre-entry total. So we're getting some cancellations, so it might not quite be up at that point, but we'll see as we get into Vegas on Tuesday and Wednesday once track goes official. But really what it has to boil down to right now, I think, is all the Australians coming. We've seen some posts from eKartingNews down there that they have, I think it was a total of 56 or 57 drivers from Australia coming, to where we didn't have any of those guys last year. So that helps to the addition overall of the event. But also, Master Shifter is going to open back up to KZ. I think that's one of the biggest things too, is guys are like, okay, you have your international guys coming over and you have guys more familiar with they like the KZ package. They just weren't happy with the 175. So now they have the ability to come back and race Master Shifter. And, we could have expanded, we're happy to see K100 Master at 44, because August, when we were at Summer Nationals, it was at 0. And so in that 3-week period, Rob got everybody on board, started calling out people, and it's going to be a great category. Hopefully we'll keep those numbers up going forward. And maybe one year Mike will be able to race there as well too. But, yeah, and again, I think we could expand the X30 Master, because again, the international numbers are going to grow. I think that's helped. I think what's hurting us is in the younger categories is that they're continuing to race over there. They have the WSK events going on. We also have the Rotax Grand Finals starting Sunday on Super Sunday with the kart handout. So a couple people have actually skipped Rotax to go to Super Nationals, or there's drivers that are going to be at the Rotax Grand Finals and skip Super Nationals. So that doesn't help in terms of getting more international drivers. But again, that 602 that we saw in 2013, we had 3 Rotax categories. I think we had KF as well too. And so there was a lot of factory support. We're just getting international guys that are coming over. I think we need to get that factory support again. We need the Lorenzo Travisinatos racing for Parolin. We need the world champions coming over. Thankfully, we have
Morgado.
Yes, Morgado coming over and racing this year at the Super Nationals, so that helps. But we need the junior world champion. We need the KZ world champion. We need the KZ Master now world champion. I think that's, again, it's kind of the battle. The manufacturers love us, but do they love us enough to focus around this one big race in America? And they were, and I don't think they're quite as much as they once were.
And so is there anything you think we can do to kind of get that interest back from them?
I think the interest is there. I think obviously COVID kind of sparked, especially for the Australians, we got big numbers there. We got to keep reaching other countries. I don't know why we don't have more Asian drivers coming and racing over from there. Karting is huge over there. We need to kind of market there. They have SKUSA Mexico, so they're trying to get more of the drivers from south of the border to come up and race up here at the Super Nationals. We used to have a really good following of Mexican drivers here at the SuperNationals. I haven't really crunched the numbers in terms of percentage from what country, but going through our previews, there's a I would probably say 10% per category is probably international. So it's a good number, but we'd like to see that grow, because that's again where we're going to see help build the overall numbers in terms of classes. But because again, you're still going to have your regulars that come race every year. You're going to have your national drivers. You're going to have your regionals drivers that want this as their one big race of the year. So again, it's gonna ebbs and flows of the sport. You're gonna have that, but hopefully we'll see the international, now that with COVID kind of the restrictions are gone, people can come back here again as long as the schedule fits, because the factories are focused solely on the WSK racing right now.
Makes sense, absolutely. Before let's see, I think we did have. Well, we had one question come in, but it was more about something from the event that we saw. It was from micro racer ROK Vegas. I think he got a penalty on the final lap and was asking what we thought about the contact. I don't have any video for you, Royce, but I wanted to give you a little bit of love and say I see you. I appreciate it. We don't have it here this week to talk about. The last thing on that, though, there was one bit of contact in the senior race. So Dave, Mike, and the last question that we'll have to give you, when it comes to drivers giving it back and forth in terms of like getting booted out of the way, giving it back to them, do you see it as even at that point or a fault against the entire field and they both go a couple spots back? Dave, you first.
I'm not much of a racer, so I don't know. It's a tough call, because again, I don't think for the kids, I think for juniors and below, you don't want that. You want to have the micro categories have been great racing, and even the minis. Some of the races we saw at Road America with Keelan Harvick and Tyler Roberts and Lucas Palacio, and I'm trying to think of Cameron Weinberg, all the other kids that were in there. Those were some great races. Micro, we've seen great races everywhere we go. You don't see the bump and runs in those categories. It's the older divisions where you're going to get that. Juniors, not so much. I mean, we've seen it where it's called, and then we've seen it when it's not called. So again, it depends on who's policing things.
But what would you police, Dave?
I think senior and above is fine.
Okay.
Again, it's to a limit, because you don't want to put the guy in the barrier. That's too far. But a little bit of contact is not going to hurt. Again, we have the bumpers. I mean, we can use them. But I think it's only reserved for again, we're pro categories. That's what the senior categories are supposed to be. Masters are maybe too old to do it, because some of them are a little more inexperienced than others. But even there, you got to be able to take contact and be able to give it a little bit. That's something I faltered with at Cup Karts. Guys were willing to push the bumper on me here and there, and I wasn't willing to do that to others, and I paid for it. That you got to be able to give a little bit of contact, not necessarily always front to back, but also side to side as well too. When you try and make a late braking move into the apex, you got to expect a little bit of side to side contact. And it just depends on who's kind of measuring. In my terms, I think senior and master racing, I don't see a problem as long as it's not egregious and deliberate to where you're taking that driver out.
Mike, your thoughts? Tit for tat.
We're
not talking crash amount. Talking
no,
not a DNF.
I'm not very popular on this one. I'm very much if you can't get it done without your bumper, you shouldn't have done it in the first place. And I say I'm not popular on that because I didn't, and again, shameless plug, but if you listen to the Fullcaster podcast, we've had several people from the 90s that'll just say, hey, yeah, we'll race how you want to be raced and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, if they're white lining or if they're blocking or this or that, then getting a little bit of love to move them out of the way is a thing. For me, I think if you do on the first attempt, right, if your first shot is to move them, that's, you know what, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter what I think, because I know that I would never move anybody out of the way on purpose, and certainly not to keep the spot. it pains me to say it, but I completely blew it this last weekend, and I got in a Cooper. And it wasn't like I was trying to move him at all. I just blew it, and rightfully was going to get a penalty. I ended up letting him by. But there was other scenarios where people will use that as their first scenario. They will use the bumper out of the gate. I would rather see you try to pass straight up. Or, and this is the other argument, if it's a pushback bumper scenario like we had, like I got in a Cooper, it didn't activate the bumper at all. I mean, just as long as the drivers know what is legal and what is not legal, that's going to really play forward as far as what they'll do. I think it's a slippery slope, though, because if we are teaching people that you can move people and it's legal, then it's not helping the racing be clean. My dad always said, race how you want to be raced. And we were big Mark Martin fans back in the day, and he would get moved out of the way all day and not move you back. And like Dave, I have been on the short end of the stick, but I go into all these events knowing how I want to race people. And the more that we instill that in our young drivers, I think we'll see that come to fruition later.
Fair enough. Very, very good. Center of the line, politically correct answer from both of you guys.
I
mean, the question to me, so I don't get me wrong, fully agree with what you're saying on both ends. I side with David on this, specifically on if someone wants to race me one way, right? If he's going to move me out of the way for a spot, then I think it's fair game for me to do it back to him, right? And not to retaliate in a crash or an intentional wreck or go and punch him out. But that's more of what I mean, right? Because that's something that I don't think is the same across the board. And if we're talking clarity across the board, I agree with Dave. I think it's something we probably shouldn't preach to the junior stuff. In that case, maybe penalize them both. But if it's two guys kind of doing it to each other, right, in a pro shifter race or a pro X30 race, all right, you both are at fault here. Neither one, we're not going to put you both to the rear. If you're both are punching each other, doesn't involve anyone else, on the racetrack punching each other. And I think to me that's fair game and part of the respect of running in the adult classes. It's you handle
and Xander, to that point, and I'm a race director too, and it'll depend on the scenario, right? If one guy roughs up somebody and he gets a little bit back, well, okay, it worked itself out, right? One of those kind of scenarios. It's just that I'd like to see the spot be earned correctly. Matt Johnson, I raced with Matt a decent amount, and he's given me a little bit of love, and as he would say, because he's also played with the iRacing, he goes, that was a 0x. It was perfectly fine. Cleanest move he's ever done. And to be fair, he'll be like, you need to learn how to run. He always tells me that. You need to learn how to use the brake more. So at the end of the day, though, Matty has never obliterated me, right? He's a class act guy, and he'll do it the right way. I don't know that that's a slippery slope. If we are teaching that you can move people out of the way.
No, I don't think you can move them. I think if it's like one move and I don't move you back, you should get a penalty. But I could either let the penalty stand or I could move you back out of the way and return.
I guess that's what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
And we again, this one subject will span hours, and there'll be so many different opinions.
Because again, are you defending or are you not defending too? If you're defending, I think it's open game, right?
And there it is. And so now you have it's a gray area, right? Am I all the way outside on, say, the standard line and I got a little bit of love, or was I slightly defensive, or was I full defensive, right? I think at the end of the day, if we see drivers making an effort to do it, quote, properly, rock and roll. If they're getting a little bit of love after being a little bit defensive, or there's already been one attempt, cool. There's been some flat out blatant, I didn't even try that hard and I moved you. Come on, guys. Let's not race that way.
Yeah.
Last question just came in. My dad was wanting to know here, Dave and Mike. I know you got your prediction show, so I stayed away from that here for this show to give you guys a love for Friday. But where is Rob Howden finishing this week in K8 next week in K8 Master? Dave, where do you have him? Is he in your top 5? Is he not?
No, there's no way he's in the top 5.
You could have just said no.
I mean,
No
we're not
way.
talking. I mean, this isn't KA Legends, right? This is KA Masters,
Nice.
right? So
Yeah,
again, he had to move up to Legends to get away from me again. Again, if he's in the upper half of the field, I think it's a win. He hasn't raced that much. He'd get Cup karts, obviously, but 100cc is a different ball game, and it's Supernats. I mean, anything can happen. But I mean, that field is tight. It's tough. There's a lot of good drivers in there. I just found out Danilo Ramallo is going to race KA 100 Masters as well. So you add him in there. I mean, yeah, it's like let's just do salt.
Sprinkle a few more. All right.
Man.
So final number, over under.
Well, I would put the over under at 20.
20.
And so I would say he's going to be he's going to be outside the top 20.
Oh, all right. Over under top 20, Mike. You got faith in him or no? You were in a 100cc race this week, so you know how tough it is on a slightly smaller field.
Yeah, a lot of talent in ours as well. I mean, just hearing all the talent at KA Masters for Supernats, it just hurts me. Originally, I wanted to try to hang out with you guys and work a little bit so I could pay to go race. Anyways, I'll tell you what, I got a chance to have Rob Howden underneath our CSK Racing tent for 4 strokes several years ago at Tri-C, and to watch his progression, to see how he kept going and getting better and better and better. Again, we're talking about 206. The guy's putting in work. I just saw on eKartingNews.com. He was with Alan Rudolph and co.
Yeah.
Here's the biggest thing that I'd be curious about. I don't know how much street course racing stuff Rob's done in any kind of like recent scenario.
Well,
and I mean barriers. Right?
He's raced Rock Island. Have you never heard him? He booked it into the bales in Rock Island. So. I mean, he's done Rock Island. He won at Bermuda, and they were literally in the middle of the city there with no barriers and curbs, and he was able to. He knows his way around staying off the barriers. There's no doubt about it. If he hits a barrier, it's either because he made a mistake or somebody put him there. And so he'll keep it off the barriers. Again, it's just the field is so tough. It's going to be hard to be in the top 15 alone with the least amount of experience that he has. He does have the Rollison Performance Group behind him, so I think that's going to help setup wise. He's going to have no issues with that. It's all going to be on the driver. And again, if he's in the top 20, it's a win. So that's why I said that. I just, unless something happens, he's going to be outside the top 20. But Mike, I mean, he's putting the work in, but I think he might need like 2 days with Alan Rudolph instead of the one he got today.
You got to land somewhere, Mike. Where you go?
Come on.
It's pretty easy for me. Our boy DC picked over. I got to go under then. He's 19th or better. Right. He's 19th or better.
Aaron?
Loser buys on Super Sunday.
There you go.
I don't know. I was thinking like 15th to 20th.
15th to 20th. So you're going under?
So you're going under. All right.
I was thinking about it. Yeah, probably. I mean, like Xander's saying top 5, and I'm like, there's no way he's getting top 5.
I'm not saying top 5. No, let me be clear. Listen, I would have given him benefit of the doubt and gone under the top 20 if Rob didn't blow us off for a very important actual professional dinner tonight. So because he did, as much as it pains me to agree with David Cole live out there for everyone to see, I'm going with him. But I'm going to give him some credit, and I'm going to say 21st. I'm going to say 21st, and maybe after penalties, top 20. But strictly outside, over the top 20, just because he didn't show up tonight. So that's the only reason I got for him.
So by the numbers, it looks like I'm the only under. It's either go really well for me at drinking time, or
Aaron's with you. Aaron's with you.
Aaron's
with you.
Yeah, so
he's 15th. He's saying 15th.
He said 15th to 20th.
Come on, mate, 15th.
I can't wait to play this for him and absolutely blow the little bit of money we'll end up taking away from T-shirt sales and having to buy him a shot Sunday night. So I hope not. We'll see. We'll find out.
Every time we get making a pass on the broadcast.
I mean,
what do we
one of us
say?
will have to do it.
What do
I
we
don't
say?
know. I don't know.
You can't say
well,
book it. You got
no, you can't because I mean, I remember the last thing to close it off. I remember the first big gig I had was WK Daytona when Rob gave the weekend off for Dave in 2015. My first big announcing gig. I'm going crazy. I'm having an awesome time, big event. And I was like, oh, hey, Rob's next to me doing the laptop. Like, I'll do a little homage to him. Hey, Rob, listen, hey, and put down the inside, book it. How was that? And then he's like, at commercial break, I got that trademarked. And I'm like, fuck. Like, what, can he sue me for that? I was 16. I didn't know. I should have known. But so I don't know. Am I going to get a bill of drinks after? You said book it 5 times while I was on the racetrack. So
we're going to find out your hotel. We're going to find out your hotel room number.
Send the
no,
tab.
incidentals.
I'm sure with him being on the racetrack, he'll allow you maybe if it's him passing somebody, you can say it, right?
Yeah,
but if it's anybody else, you got to come up with your own.
Yeah. To be fair, the cameras aren't hanging out there in 21st through.
We'll put it on him in practice. We'll give him love in practice.
There we go.
Give him some practice interviews.
We'll throw it on.
We'll get him right after. Rob, you just went 22nd in warm up. How was it out there?
Rob Howden has to lead off. He has to lead off at practice. Make sure you line up P1, sir. Then
So he needs to go out first. Oh, man. Dave, Mike, thank you guys for the extended show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait to see you next week, buddy.
Looking forward to it. It's going to be a blast.
And Dave, see you next week, buddy.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Great. Thanks for having us. Mike, we'll see you next week.
All right. That wraps us up, everybody. Thank you for tuning into KC Happy Hour. Again, we've got a lot of shows, a lot of content coming next week. We won't have a happy hour next Tuesday night. However, we'll have a lot of shows throughout the week. Live stream coverage kicks off on Thursday officially with final practice and qualifying. You get to hear Mike Smith up in the booth. We might get a couple shots of Dave doing his thing, running around, helping out in every which way that he always does, and I'll be up there as well. So we can't wait to get things started for Supernats 25. That wraps us up here tonight. We will see you guys in Las Vegas.